About 3,000 years ago, in the city of Bethlehem, a boy named David was born into a poor family. And it was here on these Judean hills of Bethlehem that he would grow up looking after his father's small flock of sheep. This city and these hills were his first playground, and then his workplace. It was here on these Judean hills outside of Bethlehem that David's character was forged over 3,000 years ago. And it was on these very hills and mountains, under the day's skies and the night stars, that David's heart beat. And as it beat to the thoughts of a tune, a song, a poem, a lamentation, it beat in harmony and in unison with God's heart. And like the beat of a drum, it grew stronger and louder as David grew. And it's on these hills and on these mountains, in the peaceful tranquility of nature, as David watched over his sheep, his flock, as his relationship with his God grew and grew, that he wrote many of his psalms and his songs and poetry. And despite his flawed human mortal nature, the same nature that we all share, David's heart and his mind and his whole being grew closer and closer to God every day. And as he grew closer and closer to God, and as his heart beat for God and beat for the ways of God, his whole life and way of life became a life dependent on God. And he became like one of his sheep, acknowledging first that God, his Father, was his shepherd. And it was on these very Judean hills and mountains that he saw and knew that his sheep depended upon him. And in understanding that, David understood if not for him as their shepherd, his sheep would perish. And if not for him, his sheep would die. If not for him, his sheep would thirst and hunger. And David's love for God grew more and more as he saw himself as one of those sheep. And so he gave God his heart. He gave him his whole heart. And he loved God. And he trusted God. He trusted God to the point where he would defend and protect even the smallest of lambs against the wild beasts of those mountains, just as God defended and protected him from the elements of nature and from the wild beasts of the field. In Samuel's day and in David's day, in these Old Testament times, these hills were notorious for the wild animals, for the lions and the bears that roamed these hills and roamed these mountains. The valley of Sorek and Timnath, for example, where Samuel grew up and lived, the lions ran loose and ran wild throughout those areas, which is only 10 to 15 kilometres away. So lions roamed throughout all these parts of the land in Old Testament times. And so, as we think of David, first of all, as a shepherd, he's living in a dangerous place in dangerous times. It's in these hills and around this city of Bethlehem that David was born and raised and became a shepherd. And it's in these Judean hills outside of Bethlehem that David is first called by God as a man after God's own heart. It was during this time of solitude as a shepherd that God begins preparing David to one day be king, just as he is doing in our lives today. Today, God is working a work of love in us to first of all forge a relationship with us, for us to know him, for us to love him with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our strength and all of our mind, for us to know God to love God and to trust God. And this is all being done in preparation for each of us to also become kings and rulers of this world.